Hello and welcome to Moderate Fantasy Violence, a podcast about pop culture and the world around it. I'm Alastair.
And I'm Nick.
And in this end-of-year special, we'll be looking back at 2016, the films and TV shows that we've loved and not loved so much, and trying to discover what we think are the best films and TV shows of the year. So, Nick, any thoughts, opinions?
Well, 2016 as a whole has, I think, been characterised on the internet as a bit of a thunderous hellscape, but there have been at least a few good films, so hopefully we can find something to say about those.
We are in the same room for the first time.
Yeah, let's see what happens. Okay, so broadly speaking, because those are the two things we've covered in something resembling detail, we're basically going to talk about our favourite films of the year and sort of general thoughts on how it's been for film, and then we're going to do something similar for TV, I think. So
that's the plan.
Yeah, since we're recording this like a day after the last one, and I don't think either of us had time to watch any more telly since then, we're probably going to just skip the "so how are you" bit and go straight into the actual material. Which means it's been an odd year in sort of mainstream blockbuster land, if only because this seems to be the first year that every other studio trying to be Marvel has definitely become like a thing. Like, it's definitely become tangibly that is happening in the culture. Nearly every film seems to be an attempt to create the cinematic universe. Yeah, I don't know. I'm curious if this is going to try finally, cause some sort of like public turn against the cinematic universe. Because even though Marvel themselves have produced two more alright films, and they weren't the greatest ever Marvel films, but Civil War was pretty good and Doctor Strange was all right. Yeah, I don't know. If people turn against the concept as a whole, I don't know. Could it be the beginning of the end?
There was a sense that I think every film this year was either setting up a shared universe or like advancing a shared universe. I mean, I've been doing sort of summaries of each year's sort of cinematic output for the last sort of 4 or 5 years. And almost every year I think I conclude that this year's been good but unoriginal. And one thing I would say this year, I think it's been bad and unoriginal. I mean, the proliferation of franchise blockbusters, your sequels, remakes, reboots, adaptations, is nothing new. I mean, there may be slightly more this year than average, but I don't think there's like vastly more, say, this year than last year. But I do feel that like the quality on overall was lower. Like a lot of the franchise blockbusters just were a bit disappointing.
The thing a lot of people are focusing on in this as the year of slightly disappointing franchise films is DC and their sort of obvious big push to start their cinematic universe with Suicide Squad and Batman v Superman, Dawn of Justice. And
it didn't go very well.
Well, I mean, it's weird sort of back and forth because obviously on the one level they're seen as not having been very good by a lot of fans and wanky online armchair critics like ourselves. But they did make money. They are pushing ahead with it. I mean, Suicide Squad is getting what seems to be a pseudo-sequel. I think it's called Gotham City Sirens, and it'll have Margot Robbie's Harley Quinn and the same director, although they are notably moving away from the actual Suicide Squad concept. And Batman v Superman is still going to spawn a new Batman film, apparently a Superman sequel, plus all the Justice League stuff. I mean, is it just going to become a thing that is kind of generally seen as a bit crap but gets made anyway? I mean, the Transformers films is on...
The 5th film comes out next year.
Exactly. When was that ever seen as good?
Yeah, I mean, they made money. I mean, lots of films being bad but making money, again, is nothing new. Like, anyone who is very down about modern film because they think there's too many superheroes, they think there's too many franchise blockbusters, is willfully ignorant of film history. They remember, like, the 80s and 90s when there was the proliferation of muscle man action movies. I mean, popular bad movies or popular dumb movies are not new. They're just changed into a new type, which is now quite specifically mainly superhero shared universes or films with sort of shared continuums between several films. But I do feel that like on average there was just like lower quality this year. I mean, yeah, you're right, they made money, and I'm sure a big event like Batman v Superman couldn't really not make money. It was going to be, they trailered it a lot, they built up the hype a lot, they had some very well known and loved film and comic characters. So I don't think there's any way it wasn't going to be a success. And the only way it wasn't a success was in the sense that it wasn't as big as the Avengers. It didn't make, colossal sums of money.
It didn't even make as much money as Captain America Civil War.
No, exactly. So in some ways, in terms of opportunity costs, DC probably did look at it as a failure. They probably looked at it as, if we'd handled this better, it could have been a lot more successful.
There seems to be a sort of a sense of disappointment there. I mean, they've been, I gather, based on reading the sort of film geek press, they have been bringing people to Justice League studio tours and going, look, there's fun and camaraderie in this film. And, we saw that Justice League teaser trailer thing, didn't we, in summer?
Yeah.
And that seemed to be very focused on, look, the Ben Affleck Batman could do banter. There's a focus on, addressing the sort of most common complaints about Batman v Superman. I think they do want to be Marvel. You could characterise it as just the next front in the culture war. It's the people who just like a good story versus those highfalutin culture snobs, which is how some people on the internet have tried to frame it. But I think DC don't want to just be the brainless films that make money but are generally seen as shit. They do want to be Marvel, or at least be liked by people. They don't want to be sort of trash.
Yeah, or just seem as really dour and dull, which is what their films kind of ended up being. But I think, even we talk about DC a lot, if we move over to Marvel, I wasn't blown away by their output this year. Captain America Civil War was good. We might discuss it in more detail at some point. Doctor Strange was, all right, I guess. The more the time has gone by, the more I've thought that it was quite an empty film. Lots of nice special effects, but not really a lot of substance. Quite a few of the other blockbusters this year have been really disappointing. The most recent X-Men movie, X-Men Apocalypse, pretty dull, pretty bad. Independence Day Resurgence, pretty bad. There's a whole host of other sort of subpar
the other
sequels.
Things that won't be in our upcoming top fives.
No, exactly. They all get a look in now. The forgettable, adequate and regrettable films of 2016.
Yeah, X-Men Apocalypse, even though, now I think everyone's quite happy to look back and go, that was bad. It was a genuine disappointment for me for a few minutes at least, because there was between First Class and Future Past, I really thought the X-Men might be having a small film resurgence, but then they just...
Yeah, I had higher hopes for that film than what was borne out, mainly because of the strength of Days of Future Past, which was actually quite good. It just turns out that, I don't know, whatever winning formula they were onto, they managed to lose.
Yeah.
And I felt very much like that was kind of the general feel of 2016 was quite a lot of disappointments. Many of the things that weren't disappointments were things I just weren't excited about because I kind of knew they'd be disappointing anyway.
Yeah, I guess we're focusing quite heavily on big, obvious, like Marvel, DC franchise blockbuster shit. There have been some good films. Again, we'll get onto the specifics in a minute. But I didn't feel like a lot of things really broke through as unexpected successes.
No, there wasn't anything like last year when there was that Mad Max Fury Road, which I think a lot of people thought was going to be, it's another remake sequel. But actually, when it came out, I was like, no, this is really, really good. You need to go see it. And I think actually that could have been my favourite film of last year, of 2015.
Yeah, I don't know, the closest I can think of is Deadpool, which people thought, when it first came out, people were like, it looks like it might be fun. And then it was, and, that was nice, but I don't think it was a life-making change in the same way.
Deadpool was one of the films that did really exceed my expectations. I really liked it and thought it was really funny, and it generally did really impress me. Another film, actually, and we have focused quite heavily on American movies, is, bring it back to good old Blighty for a minute, is the David Brent Life on the Road, which is another one that I thought would have been a complete, just cynical cash-in on nostalgia for The Office and David Brent, but actually turned out to be quite good. So there were a few films that did.
Yeah, I was touch and go on that film. It was less of a waste of time than I expected it to be, but there were quite a lot of good, awkward David Brent jokes in the middle. But they really did go for the big, tearful climax in a way that I felt a bit unearned. Anyway, I suspect I'm just rehashing our David Brent review at this stage. But yeah.
My point is, I guess it wasn't all doom and gloom. A year is a long time, and we have seen a lot of films. So if my opinion is that the overall standard was poor, that doesn't necessarily mean there weren't moments of good stuff, or even genuine brilliance at times. It's just I felt they were kind of scattered a bit further apart than normally.
Yeah, I know if the trend everyone points to is the idea of Hollywood becoming more risk-averse. They're doing all these cinematic universes because they hope it'll mean they get a string of films that are a sure thing, and they're all based on pre-existing things, which again hopefully makes it more of a sure thing. Although ultimately the problem isn't so much that they're making risk-averse concepts or anything, it's that the films themselves are so slightly generic and nothingy.
Well, I don't know, the risk-averseness is one thing I'd point to when I said in the past that I think we've had a lot of unoriginal years. Every year I've been doing a film summary, it's always said it's been unoriginal, and that's a product of Hollywood being risk-averse. But like I said, I thought for the previous last 3 or 4 years, they've been good years. So you can be risk-averse and good because everyone knows it's a bad business decision to make a bad movie, at least to make a bad movie accidentally. Making a third Iron Man movie is a pretty risk-averse thing to do. Making a third film following up 2 successful films is not exactly rolling the dice and being really out there trying something new. But Iron Man 3 is one of the best Marvel films they've made so far. So if you're concerned about lack of innovation, lack of originality, being risk-averse is a factor. If you're concerned about lack of quality, then I guess that's only really a factor if you think quality can only come from innovation. Innovation is an element of quality, but I think, as you know, like I say, films like Iron Man 3 show you can be not very innovative, but still very good.
Yeah, I don't know. I've had a year where, I don't know, maybe just because of how I've chosen to live my life, or maybe due to the media decisions I've made in order to do this podcast, but I do have come away thinking, wow, I feel like I really love to see more completely original things. I feel like if a completely... No, not completely original. That's probably a bullshit way of saying it. I watch, Flash and Arrow, for God's sake. But, a thing that isn't either an adaptation of or continuation of something I really liked when I was 10 or even like 2 or 3 years ago, I would probably give it more points just for being something new, as we may well come up against this concept when I do my top 5s in a bit. But, yeah, I don't know. I like the idea of just going, quality is all that matters. But the idea of, I think Marvel are possibly now discovering that making decent quality superhero films just again and again at roughly the same level of decentness with roughly the same cast, there is a sense of diminishing returns. Possibly, some people would say unfairly. You are going to be judged based on your own past output. So, if Marvel put out another okay superhero film, people go, I can't do something else. But if DC ever managed to reach the level of putting out a film that's a Marvel okay film, everyone would go, yes, well done, you've done it. I think everyone's at this point basically hoping that Wonder Woman turns out to be a film that's as good as an okay Marvel film.
Yeah, that's definitely everyone's expectations, and probably all you can reasonably hope for at this point. But I think it's more, if you think about it like a diet, in that you can eat perfectly good food, but if you eat the same type of perfectly good food, if you eat the same nice restaurant every day, then you will get bored of it. So I guess, originality is, and trying something different is good. I mean, one thing I thought we really did lack this year is something that genuinely surprised me. As kind of like, ooh, that was really surprisingly good. I mean, there's a couple of things that were a bit of a surprise in my list, but nothing that was like a massive surprise that really came out of left field to kind of...
Yeah, it's a bad time to be someone who genuinely likes sort of, big, obvious, expensive mainstream entertainment. I can't pretend to be a big into the art scene. I'd like my shit blowing up, but also kind of wishes it was something a bit aesthetically or stylistically different, because in the field of big mainstream entertainment, it's a bit conservative at the moment. So, shall we break out the top 5s?
Yeah, so you have a jingle there.
Oh, why not? Okay, so...
Do you want to go first?
I think, Alastair, say what, you're Captain Film, and I'll be General TV. So, do you want to go first with your number 5?
Okay, so my 5th favourite film, seen in the cinema in 2016, was Arrival, starring Amy Adams and Jeremy Renner. For those who haven't seen the film or heard our episode about it, it's a film in which Amy Adams plays a linguist and a translation specialist who's brought in to translate the language of an unusual race of aliens that have just arrived on Earth. This was one of the few things I would say, and why I made number 5 on my list is because it was a bit of a surprise this year. I hadn't really heard of it before I got the brochure for the London Film Festival, where we saw this film. It was something that kind of, took me by surprise. It's not something that I'd read about, built up because it was based on a famous book or TV show or a remake of a past successful film. It was a different sort of story from a lot of the films we see, in that it was, even though it was a science fiction film about alien invasions, the fantastical stuff was kept to a minimum. It was more about scientists trying to solve, a problem. So, yeah, that's my 5th favourite film of the year.
And yes, we originally covered that in MFV 20, apparently, should you want to go back and listen to the full glorious discussion. However, my 5th favourite film of the year is not Arrival. It is The Neon Demon, directed by Nicholas Winding Refn. We covered in MFV 12, again, full review available there, so I won't reiterate myself too much. This is a sort of stylised, arty film broadly about the fashion industry and how it's a savage place, but it goes to some fairly surreal areas. As I mentioned a second ago, I do like my mainstream cinema, I will admit, but The Neon Demon, although it had its sort of slack points, is not something I would have seen normally. I saw it for this podcast, and it's had to be in this list somewhere because it just fucking stuck with me, to be honest. I don't want to spoil it, because I think we managed to get through our review for once without spoiling it. Or did we? Who can remember? Yeah, I still see that when I close my eyes.
You can't watch that film and not remember it and be affected by it. It has a way of getting under your skin. Like a lot of Nicholas Winding reference films. But that one even more so, I think, is one of the most viscerally unpleasant films I've seen in a long time. Very powerful.
Yes, a sort of proper satire horror thing. Yeah, it was very, very unique, very interesting. And if you're at all interested in your sort of odder, more art-housey films and slightly unpleasant odd art-housey films, then yes, highly recommended. Number 5 of the year, according to Nick Bryan.
So my 4th favourite film of the year is a recent one, Rogue One, A Star Wars Story. You know, after, spending most of my teenage years suffering my way through 3 depressingly bad Star Wars films, over the last year and a bit, I'm really pleased that we've had 2 good Star Wars movies. And I did really like Rogue One, especially the final battle at the end. Really, really good, really tense, really dramatic. We reviewed this in our most recent MFV episode, MFV 23. You know, go straight there for fresh, hot opinions. But yeah, it really didn't disappoint, and really one of those films that reminds me why I love Star Wars so much ever since I was a kid.
Yeah, and fans of ironclad consistency will now be pleased to hear that number 4 on my list is Rogue One, A Star Wars Story.
Yes, agreement.
Agreement, yes, which, since we are, I think we've got to actually say this, but we are possibly trying to negotiate this into some sort of unified MFV top 3 once we've finished, so at least this can go at number 4 in the top 3. What's going on? Anyway.
Well, it's a good candidate.
Or at least if it's something we agree on, maybe it'll be number 1. But yeah, this, as I say, we covered it in MFV 23. It's very good, it's very solid, it's a very clear, straight story, which is appealing in the year of the cinematic universe. Yes, good film, bravo. I think we covered it.
Number 3 in my top 5 films of the year is The Green Room, starring Anton Yelchin and Patrick Stewart. Another tense thriller. We covered it in MFV number 8. Yeah, it was really good, low budget, indie thriller. All takes place in kind of one small location, lots of claustrophobia. It's about a punk band who get held hostage by a group of Nazis led by Patrick Stewart, who is terrifying. It's just a great tense film. If you like punk music, if you like thrillers, if you like sort of, low budget, gritty indie thrillers, highly recommended. Yeah, it's been a good year for Patrick Stewart, especially as I saw him on the stage this year in No Man's Land as well. So very happy with my Patrick Stewart this year.
Yeah, and he cleverly skipped out on the not-so-good X-Men film.
Yes, yeah, he definitely chose the right X-Men film to appear in from the most recent 3.
Yeah, as long as Logan's good, he's done well.
Yeah.
Anywho, and speaking of superheroes, though, number 3 in my list, you knew it was coming. It's Captain America, Civil War. To be honest, it was touch and go between this and Rogue One for the 3 and 4 position, but ultimately Captain America won out because I like superheroes more than I like Star Wars, basically. It had all the drama I like. It had Robert Downey Jr. being good. It did have some well-documented massive plot holes, but it's still the recent superhero film that I have the most affection for, just because of the sort of level of crossover melodrama, which it really captured in a way that a lot of the superhero films and TV have sort of struggled to do and just sort of broken out into some sort of enormous special effects. But Captain America actually had the interpersonal melodrama. I said personal. Does that mean I have to drink? We do have drinks.
Yes, yeah.
Drink
for personal.
Right. Yes, live performance of the Moderate Fantasy Violence drinking game. Now we just need to watch out for us saying week when we mean fortnight. Anyway, we covered this in Moderate Fantasy Violence 6, and of course, as well as being good and having Captain America and Iron Man in it, it also had what potentially could be the best cinematic Spider-Man I've yet seen, or at least certainly the best in a few films. So that helped push it up the list as well.
Yeah, I'd just like to say I did really like that film, although it didn't make my top 5.
What?
But I did really like it. And it had some great action scenes, especially the big fight in the middle where they brought all the different Marvel characters together in one big scene. And also it then had the brains to, at the final scene, just set it down to a more manageable, accessible conflict. I probably shouldn't say too much in case the few people who haven't seen Captain America: Civil War are listening to this.
Yes, but this year's Marvel films do display that they've definitely learnt the lesson of don't necessarily finish your film with a massive special effects orgy.
Yeah.
Whereas DC still seems to be working towards that lesson.
Yeah.
Marvel do seem to have, with both Doctor Strange and Civil War, they've actually done a good job of finishing on a good bit of action, but it's actually a bit more comprehensible.
Yes, definitely. I'd agree with that, and I think it's definitely a lesson that I'm very glad Marvel has learned. Number 2, getting close to the top now. My second favourite film of this year was a film I saw in the cinema on my birthday, and it's The Girl with All the Gifts, based on the novel by M.R. Carey, starring Gemma Arterton and Paddy Considine. We covered this in MFV 17. It's a really great zombie film, but it's not particularly standard, zombie film. It's a bit different. If you haven't seen it, I'd recommend going see it rather than me spoiling it. But it is very tense, it is very gory, it's very unsettling. The music was especially good. Paddy Considine was excellent. He's always very good. But he did a really good job in this film, as was Glenn Close and Gemma Arterton. In fact, the whole cast. And they got M.R. Carey to write the screenplay. The whole thing was very well executed. For what was probably a low-budget British sci-fi horror movie, it all worked out extremely well. I'd highly recommend everyone go see it.
Yeah, this is similar to what Alastair just said about Civil War. This is a film I did really like. And also, I keep waiting for them to release the soundtrack, because that has really good shrieking vocal noises on it, but it doesn't seem to have come out yet.
I would definitely buy that soundtrack.
I will be buying that soundtrack as soon as someone finally releases it. Yeah, it didn't make my top 5, but it is a really good zombie film, and possibly, perhaps unfairly, the reason it didn't make my top 5 is because I spent a lot of time watching it thinking this isn't quite as good as the book, which is unfair. It's both a good film and a very, very good book. Anyway, my number 2, I think we're ready for that now.
Yep.
Yet again, fans of consistency, it's Green Room, starring Patrick Stewart as a Nazi, as reviewed in MFV 8 and mentioned on Alastair's list a few minutes ago. This is very good. I just really enjoyed this. I don't know, it's the claustrophobia of it all, the sort of tight constraints. I do like, as evidenced when we did Die Hard last week. Fortnight. Drink. No, it is last week. I don't have to drink. As evidenced in the last episode, I like a good sort of tight thing in a closed space. Although it did give in to the temptation to have its finale in a different environment. Yeah, it was still a really, really good film. Really tense. Patrick Stewart's great villain. He should do it more. And yeah, definitely my favourite Nazi-based bit of entertainment of the year. A point that will come up when we get to my worst TV show.
Ooh.
Yeah, I think it's time for the number 1s.
Number 1, drum roll. Feel free to replace that with an actual drum roll if you want.
Don't test me.
My favourite film of the year was, as mentioned by Nick, The Neon Demon. Yeah, partly because that is a film that you do not forget in a hurry. As reviewed in MFV 12, it's surreal, it's abstract, it's strange, it's intriguing, it's beautiful, it's violent, it's disturbing. Need I say more? I think it's been recommended enough now to encourage everyone to go see it. But yes, my favourite film of the year, Nicholas Winding referenced The Neon Demon.
Yes, and now my favourite film of the year, which on a similar theme is something that has already come up in Alastair's list. It is Arrival, the sci-fi alien thing with Amy Adams and Jeremy Renner. Yeah, I did actually read an interesting article this week just gone by Marzin Salim of Kraken podcast, in which he did critique Arrival quite thoroughly in a way that did almost make me feel bad about doing what I'm now doing and saying it was my favourite film of the year, but I like a bit of big emotional euphoria at the end of the film. I'm a Stephen Moffat fan, so I like a certain type of storytelling that I probably shouldn't name because it's a massive spoiler. And yeah, the article by Marzin is on the Porno Kitsch site. If you want to read a really intelligent criticism of Arrival, containing a lot of entirely valid points that I do think are correct. I think it could have done more with the concept, and it is, in a lot of ways, quite a simple, straightforward, almost Doctor Who level story dressed up with flourishes. But nonetheless, I liked it a lot because I like Doctor Who and big splashy cinema. So yeah, Arrival, good film. I cried at all the sad bits in Doctor Who, which is like every other week, and I enjoyed this a lot as well.
Great. So did you have your number 5 as my number 1 and my number 1 as your number 5?
Yes. Yes.
We're on roughly the same page then.
We're on the opposite ends of the same page, yeah.
So I think we had 4 out of 5 the same films.
Yes, the only film that you named that I didn't was Girl with All the Gifts, and the vice versa was Civil War.
Yeah.
We both seem to place Rogue One
in the same position,
4 and Green Room above that. So realistically, the MFE top 3 therefore would be number 1 Green Room, number 2 Rogue One, and number 3 either Arrival or The Neon Demon. And since we're in the same place, I could get some cutlery from the kitchen and we could fight.
Or we could. Okay. Next week, the podcast will be hosted by one of us, and a rotating panel of guests.
Yeah, next week's podcast will be recorded in a similar format to this, except it'll be audio of my police interrogation. Mine, of course, but I would win.
Okay, or we could use the Google toss a coin.
I don't know. Part of me is prepared to let it go on Arrival because, as I say, although I did love it a lot as a bit of emotional cinema to tap my easy tear ducts, I did read that article. I do think it had a lot of valid points about why it may not ultimately be the most wonderful thing in the world. So possibly I might concede this one to the Neon Demon and then view it as some sort of favour that I could hold over you when we negotiate TV.
Yeah, well, maybe we make this a top 4 rather than a top 3 as we agreed on so much.
Concession is for nerds. Totality of victory. No, I will concede this one. I will. So yeah, I think based on Democracy and Sharing, the moderate fantasy violence top 3 films for 2016. Again, based entirely on a spectrum of films we both saw for the podcast. I think we have both seen other films this year. But the top 3 films of MFV things we have MFV seen is number 3, The Neon Demon, number 2, Rogue One, and number 1, Green Room. I'm okay with that. Green Room
I'm very happy with that list as well.
But I put Green Room higher than you did, so I win.
You do. Shall we now move on to the other end of the spectrum, and we're both going to name what we thought our worst film of the year was. Most disappointing, most dislikable.
Yeah, I think we've... Yeah, but I don't know if we need to spend hours on this because, no one needs too much whining in the world. But we did have a sort of... When planning this feature, we did have a bit of back and forth about whether what's worse, something that tries something ridiculous and fails, or something that just turns up and is a bit boring and obvious and disappointing in a boring way. And basically, depending on which version of the definition you want... Basically, I thought Batman v Superman was terrible, but on the other hand, but at least
we agree on that. Yeah.
But at least it was trying to do something. Whereas I thought the other one I've starred, Warcraft, was both terrible and boring.
So, did you find it hard to choose a worse film?
I did, although if it put a gun to my head, I might actually choose Warcraft because I don't know, as a long-running, massive air quotes internet critic, I do like an interesting failure. It gives me something to talk about. Whereas finding something to say about Warcraft other than generic fantasy, quite boring, is quite hard.
Yeah. I found it quite hard to choose the worst film of the year, which meant it was probably quite a bad year for film, if it was a struggle to find out which one really excelled in being awful. Despite strong competition from The Blair Witch, from Independence Day Resurgence, I would have to agree that Batman v Superman was the worst thing I sat through this year. It's pretentious, it's self-indulgent, it's overly long, it makes no sense, it's really quite dull, and the person who made it clearly thinks it's genius, and it's not. It really was a completely depressing shitstorm. That really makes me wonder what on earth is the Justice League film that comes out next year going to be like.
Banterous. I saw the trailer, it's going to be banterous.
It's possible that if you add banter on top of that film, it would even be worse.
We'll tell you in about 20 episodes' time. Next, it's time to talk about the telly. So
it's over there.
God's sake. As film has been perhaps having a bit of a slump year as it flails around for franchises, general conception seems to be that TV is doing all right, or at least all righter. I mean, I think there's certainly a lot of it. The volume of people trying to produce TV, and indeed, obviously, not to turn this back into film, the extent to which films are in many ways, trying to become TV by becoming so heavily serialised. Yes, TV is doing all right. The idea that there's nothing you can't produce a 10-issue premium-style TV show out of has both led to some interesting experiments this year and some disasters. This is probably not be the first time I subtweet the man in the high castle in this section. So, yeah, weirdly, TV, as it proliferates and expands in whatever its current direction is, seems to really, a lot of it anyway, seems to kind of fetishise the new original idea rather than just let's remake what's been before. I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm probably generalising to an offensive degree. Obviously, I watch Flash, Arrow, Walking Dead. These are all TV shows based on things that already exist or that are currently running. But TV does seem to have this, because everyone seems to want to be HBO, I guess, or be Netflix. There's a lot of a desire to actually do things that haven't been done before, because that seems to be what you do in TV. I guess because TV, although still expensive, isn't as much of a lumbering oil tanker as film seems to be.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think there's definitely, as we said before, less risk-adverseness in TV. I mean, it's not like every single TV project that gets money for it is original and daring. TV is not going through a kind of American New Wave cinema moment like we had in the 1970s when newness was priced and valued above all else. But, if you look at Netflix with, say, some of the shows they're putting out, like, Fargo, Dusk Till Dawn, they're taking like established films and turning them into TV shows, just as cinema is taking established TV shows and turning into film. I mean, we're getting a Baywatch film next year.
Yeah.
But there is definitely more original stuff in TV. There's more things when I see that, like, oh, that's like, they've made this idea because it's about a concept. Like someone said, I've got these ideas for these characters, or this setting, or this unusual thing, and they're trying to, it's the concept is what's driving the production, whereas with films, a lot of it is just like, I've got the rights to this old film, this video game, this book, this comic character, this TV show, let's just make, that's what I feel that's very much like that's driving it. I mean, especially in the 90s and stuff, TV did become like a bit more formulaic. Everything was like lawyers shows, doctors shows, cop shows, relationship shows that were, there were comedies. Now I think, it's not like they've broken out of the molds of, to some degree, of like the kind of the cop show, the lawyer show.
I think it's not that those molds have been broken out of or destroyed. It's possibly that there's now so much TV from so many sources that people who want to watch sort of slightly samey procedural crime shows can do it, and it doesn't really have any effect on people like me who want to watch wanky premium HBO shows. Everything just seems to exist. I mean, the fact that, for whatever reason, the fact that there's loads of money to make expensive shows of one type doesn't seem to stop them finding lots of money to make expensive shows of the other type, maybe because the shows just aren't quite as expensive as films.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think it's definitely the choice aspect is what there's so much TV out there. There are less films, it's just a factor of it. And because films are more expensive to make, I remember a few years ago seeing an interview with one of the producers of The Terminator, Sarah Connor, Chronicles TV show, and they said because of the advances in technology, they can, do on a TV budget in a single TV episode, what it took the entire budget of the Terminator 2 film to do. I mean, like, the T-1000 character in Terminator 2 was cutting edge at the time and cost millions and millions to do. Now it's cheap enough that you can put, a Terminator 2 character in a sci-fi TV show. The proliferation of technology has driven down costs, which has increased supply. I'm going to wear my economics hat for a moment, which has increased choice. Which is why now you say you can find that niche you want. Like, if you want... I'm sure there's plenty of procedural law and police shows and doctor shows out there if that's what you want.
Exactly. For procedural crime, I mean, Elementary is now on like season 5. But I think Bones might even be still running. And there's probably some new shows that I haven't heard of.
Yeah. Or you can get some interesting shows that kind of do they use the structure of the traditional show but have an interesting twist. I really enjoyed this year, although it's not on my top 5 list, iZombie, because, it is a procedural weekly whodunit show.
Based on a comic.
But it does have the unusual twist in that one of the people leading the investigation of the murder of the week is a zombie. And we've talked about Class and its similarities to Buffy, kind of very much doing Monster of the Week, or at times doing Monster of the Week. But then kind of mixing it up with a bit more arc plot, a bit more characterization, working in different ways. So I guess there's a lot of innovation and there's a lot of experimentation going on in TV, which is sadly missing from film.
Yeah, as I say, I think it's just there's the option to do more things. I mean, like everything, as I said earlier about cinematic universes, the popularity of your HBO premium, luxurious, expensive, long conversations, slow plot advancement shows does lead to the existence of people trying to do the same thing but doing it badly. It's like, I see what you've instead made is a 10-episode show where nothing happens and incredibly flat characters have long, boring conversations that they're not actually interesting enough to sustain. And, I mean, you could arguably say even the Marvel Netflix shows, which I broadly like, do occasionally strain a bit from trying to be premium telly.
It is, I think, Amazon and Netflix that are driving... I think things forward in the TV medium. Like, Netflix is affordable, loads of people have subscriptions, and it gives you an access to this enormous universe of television and different things out there, so you can find something that exactly suits your interests. Amazon Prime, ditto, enormous universe of content to dig through, and this has given space for new interesting things to arise, which are getting people's attention and, doing some new interesting things, and that is having influence elsewhere, network TV shows. Even like you can see the influence of arc-based and these TV shows on things like the BBC and the stuff they're outputting recently.
Interesting that US networks, like the actual, not the cable ones like HBO or AMC or like Netflix, the actual networks like whatever
NBC,
they are, Fox,
NBC, CBS,
yeah.
ABC, yeah.
The days when they used to produce like credible TV seem to be kind of fading. There was a period in like the early to mid 2000s where the networks did produce like Heroes, Lost, 24, which I'm not pretending those are like fucking art gallery art, but they were shows that like people in our sort of male nerd class liked. They were extremely influential and popular.
No, they were. You're right. The innovation was with the networks at one point. Just like in the early 90s, between Buffy and the X-Files, they changed TV completely. In the early 2000s, network TV changed mainly between 24 and Lost. They changed TV again. I mean, they created the modern blueprint, the arc plot, build up to the big cliffhanger endings, things like that. But yeah, they had the flame and they've let it go out, and so the flame has been lit elsewhere.
Yeah, I don't live in America. I don't know exactly what's on what network, but I have read sort of articles and stuff about what the networks are launching, and it's been a while since a US network drama has really... The last US network drama that penetrated the bubble of, I've heard this show is good, I should watch it, for me was Hannibal.
Yeah.
Which did seem a lot like it was a network trying to do HBO, and based on the fact that it then turned into one of these constant low ratings panic stories, evidently not very successfully, which is a shame. It was good, but
I think Hannibal's one of those things maybe a little bit too early. If it had been on Netflix now, it probably would have found a really good audience, because it does have a very dedicated internet-based audience of people who really like it. It was too early for that to build to a kind of to build the pressure and make it sort of the Netflix fixation it probably should have been.
Well, yeah, I mean, these sort of your credible HBO Netflix shows, I don't think, they build a certain type of buzz among, again, internet critic nerd folk, and yeah, they get you a certain type of positive press, but it's not necessarily the sort of positive press that gets you the ratings and the ad money that the networks want. The only shows that I've followed with much interest in the last few years that have come from US networks, aside of Hannibal, have been the occasional sitcom, I think. I think both Community and Parks and Rec were network shows, and they are both good TV. And also, I think both other shows that have struggled with terrible ratings and eventually ended up doing some sort of tightrope act on the cancellation line. It's actually a point that the CW is a US network, and maybe it's just because I'm primarily coming to culture from a nerdy perspective, but things like Flash, Arrow, Supergirl, whatever, have a lot more buzz than, in this country at least, than a lot of US network shows. That doesn't necessarily make them amazing or premium TV. It may just possibly mean that they're successfully taking advantage of the general cultural superhero boom. But they are one of the few things bucking the trend I was just talking about.
Yeah, I think there's no show on my list of top 5 of the year that is a US network show.
I don't think, well, assuming that you followed the same rules I did and we just named shows we'd covered, I don't think we've covered any, have we?
No, that is also a good point. But there wasn't any consideration.
Yeah, Brooklyn Nine-Nine's good as well. That's a US network show.
Yeah,
I'll give it that.
The one thing they seem to do is the sitcom, which is one thing where I think the traditional format still really works, in that people do kind of like... They don't want their sitcoms to be generic, but they do want them to go with the kind of the format that makes them accessible, which is why I think every successful US network show that we've mentioned has been a sitcom.
Comedies on channels like HBO, or even like the comedies that like Netflix has tried to do. I mean, things like Aziz Ansari's Master of None, which is very good, is a sort of it's a sort of similar-ish to Curb Your Enthusiasm, in that it's a sort of a quite quiet show with a lot of the comedy based on awkwardness, starring, in this case, not actually a fictional Aziz Ansari, but a character which he seems to be bringing a lot of himself to, inviting about quite a few of his own experiences by proxy. And that's, again, that's a sort of comedy that's very credible, but it's not. I don't know if it's the sort of comedy that gets you the mega ratings. I don't know. I mean, as people have used the phrase peak TV, I've heard that about. People seem to think there's quite a lot of TV, and there is. There
is a lot of TV, but I think there's always been TV produced in large quantities ever since television first started challenging film in the late 1960s, at least in America, which was about that TV is kind of a 24-hour medium. They've got to produce vast quantities of it. Obviously, there's a lot of very cheap shows like panel shows and things like that. But there's always going to be a very large amount of TV. I think that TV is certainly going through a golden age right now. I've certainly heard that phrase used, the golden age of TV. So, I think it's where the innovation is, it's where the interesting things that are happening is. There's certainly some shows that are very, very good, and it's also a place where there's new stuff coming along that is getting my attention. So,
and increasingly it's also where the A-list talent is. I mean, a lot of people who used to be mostly known for movies are now going to TV because that's where they can actually get money to do what they want to do.
There's also one other thing that has been really broken down is the Chinese wall between film and TV. It was previously only the biggest TV stars were able to launch their film careers, and usually fairly unsuccessfully. Only even most of the Friends, being enormous TV stars, couldn't properly cross over to film.
Yeah.
But now, you got big film stars going doing TV shows, and people were launching, careers in TV and then translating them, successfully into big film careers, Chris Pratt being an obvious example. We're just talking about Parks and Rec.
Yeah, and I've just finished watching the first season of Westworld, which has Anthony Hopkins in as a regular in every episode, and again, that's arguably a step down for him, but it's certainly the best received thing I've heard of him doing for quite a long time.
He's certainly a very credible actor, and he's still a very good actor.
Yeah, but certainly I've seen more people get excited by his role in Westworld than I did about his still, competent, but just okay turn as Odin in the 4 films.
Yeah, well, he'll be back next year doing that.
Oh yeah, Thor Ragnarok, that's happening. Right, okay, as the more TV half of the podcast, I'm going to kick off the TV top 5 before the negotiations commence. Number 5 in my top 10 TV for the year was Feature, the AMC adaptation of the classic comic by Garth Ennis and Steve Dillon, who we sadly lost this year in one of 2016's many shitty tragedies. Yeah, it's massively sad that Steve Dillon passed away, but he did at least get to see his most famous creation translated to the TV in something that at least somewhat captured the spirit of it. Yeah, Feature was an ultra-violent, ultra-odd, slightly nihilistic, religious, supernatural drama set in a small Texas town, starring Dominic Cooper as a preacher who gained supernatural power from nowhere. We covered this, as we did many TV shows this year, twice. We did it in MFV 8, where we covered the first few episodes, and then we looked back on it in MFV 14. So, if you want to hear more about it, go there, and there is an extent to which this is a somewhat personal choice. The work of Garth Ennis as a whole has been a huge influence on a lot of how I've formed and written in my life, and yeah, I did get a certain level of emotion about it as well when Steve Dillon passed a few months back. But yeah, I do think it was a good show, if slightly stretched in the middle, that did capture a lot of the spirit of what I loved about this as a teenager.
It was a very good show. I did really like it. It really did capture that small town American vibe. It was very tense. It had a quite dark sense of humour. Preacher is something I've heard a lot about, especially as when I was a teenager, I used to read Empire a lot. And Empire, which obviously does a lot of reviewing of comic book movies and stuff, used to always write about Preacher as something like, wouldn't it be amazing if this was made a film, but it'll never ever be a film because Hollywood will never pay money for it. Well, as we said, now we have Amazon Prime, and they will pay money to make Preacher. So I'm glad I finally got to see it after so many people had talked about it for so many years. It certainly didn't disappoint for being darkly funny and sometimes just dark.
Yeah, and sometimes just violent. So some good moments of clearly somewhat Tarantino-inspired ultra-violence going on there.
So, from the dark, the darkly funny, and the times ultra-violent, we go to another show that is, at times, all of those things. My fifth favourite TV show of the year was Black Mirror, third series of Charlie Brooker's now direct-to-Netflix technology satire. Yeah, I wasn't so much of a fan of Black Mirror before, which is one of the reasons why this is on the list, is it was one of the few things that surprised me this year by how much I really liked it. There were some really great episodes. The much-discussed San Junipero, the fourth episode, I believe, of this series. That was really, really good, really great story. It resonated with me. It lasted, it had an emotional impact. We reviewed this in MFV 20, so if you wanted to hear our thoughts on every single Black Mirror episode.
Yeah, that was deep, man.
Yep, go back and listen to it then. I'm just going to say this moment, this series I really like San Junipero, and I really like the final episodes, the Hated in the Nation, partly inspired by some of the Scandi Noir. Black Mirror, I'd recommend it. If you've got Netflix, go watch it.
Yeah, this would normally be where I'd now offer some opinions on Alastair's choice, but I'm going to go straight to my number 4, because my number 4 is Black Mirror. I echo a lot of what Alastair just said. It's one of these things where you don't like to think about the fact that having a lot of money probably helps do things. But win elections and make good TV. Sometimes having lots of money is more helpful than just having a dream.
Yeah, but that's the moral of 2016.
Yeah, and it's certainly the moral of season 3 of Black Mirror, which I think did massively benefit from having a load more money from going to Netflix, and therefore allowing Charlie Brooker to do something starting from a bit of a wider scope than what if there was someone in a house fucking a pig. I thought that he really did take it to a new level with this series. I thought it was pretty good. I mean, it's only number 4. There were still a couple of episodes which suffered slightly from clever Black Mirror twists and syndrome, or just from being maybe a bit undercooked. But as a whole, yeah, I was really impressed with it. I thought the general moment-to-moment writing was great. I agree that both the episodes Alastair named are excellent. I also quite liked the first one, Nosedive, and the others will, for the most part, a fairly, sort of at least a sturdy level of quality as well. There was one with VR games that I wasn't a huge fan of, but again, as Alastair said, you can go to MFV 20 to hear us literally process the entire lot one by one. So yep, that was my number 4.
My number 4 was a show that is featured in my sort of favourite TV shows of the year for the last quite a few years. It was Game of Thrones, that we first covered in MFV 6, and then later went back to review in MFV 11. It was a great series as ever, this. I think we kind of concluded that this series sort of wraps up the Act 2 of the overall mega plot of Game of Thrones. It did start quite slowly, which is why it's not... Usually Game of Thrones is my kind of favourite or second favourite show of the year. This year, I'd say the series started quite slowly, but when the second half, the plot advanced, in big strides, it was very cool. lots of good stuff happened, and we got a sense that in the next season, big things are going to be happening.
Yeah, again, we're going to do a tactical jump forward, because my number 3 pick in my 2016 MFV Best of TV thing is Game of Thrones. It appears Alastair has slightly higher standards than me. Everything I liked, he liked just slightly less.
Yeah, we might find that for all the others up until the top.
Actually, it's interesting.
Oh no, because if we did, because then your number 1 would be something that's not on my list.
Yeah, anyway, we'll find out in a minute. Game of Thrones, to be honest, as readers of my top 10 TV I've been doing on my website for a few years will know, yeah, Game of Thrones has been very slightly slipping down in my estimations for a couple of years. Just series 4 and 5, although it would be cruel to describe them as bad, there was something slightly ho-hum about them. There was something slightly running the wheel, moving things forward in a slightly not that riveting way about them. I mean, they've always had a Token's shit storyline. There's been one of those in Game of Thrones almost the entire time, certainly since about season 2 or 3. Yeah, who can forget Jaime and Bronn go on holiday to the weird land of the Sand Snakes?
Yeah, that was odd.
Wasn't it?
Quite slow.
There were bits in this series that didn't work, but this was the year where it felt like they kicked everything up, moved things forward, started bringing characters together instead of driving them forever, slightly further apart. And yes, I really enjoyed this, and I'm hopeful that we will see a bit more excitement in the coming, admittedly annoyingly slightly shorter, but still, last 2 seasons.
My third favourite TV show of 2016 was Luke Cage on Netflix and from Marvel. We reviewed this in MFV 18. Obviously, Luke Cage was a character we were introduced to last year in the Jessica Jones TV show, which I absolutely loved. This show did not disappoint. I've been, since he first appeared, I've been looking forward to Luke Cage's solo outing. The show was good, it was clever, it was, it had amazing music, it had great writing, beautiful photography, a really engaging story, some superb acting. It really goes to show that, Marvel are great at doing these TV adaptations. Wasn't such a fan of Daredevil this season, but really liked Jessica Jones last year, really liked Luke Cage this year, and I'm looking forward to the forthcoming more Jessica Jones, more Luke Cage, and The Defenders next year.
And Iron Fist. Yes, anyway, I'm actually not going to say that my number 2 was Luke Cage, because it isn't. So I will pause to briefly mention this, because we didn't actually get to covering the second half of the Luke Cage season, which, to be honest, this is the reason why Luke Cage actually isn't in my top 5. It is one of the main contenders for the 5th position, but eventually got beaten out by Preacher just because of my teenage love for the material and my sadness over the death of Steve Dillon. I don't know, it possibly lost something a bit in the second half for me. The villain they brought in the second half, I won't bother naming him just in case it's a spoiler. Actually, he's mentioned in the first episode. Diamondback, the villain they brought in for the second half, was not as good as the villains they used in the first half, and I felt it got a bit repetitive and a bit slow at times, and for me it didn't quite stretch above the other things in the top 5, but it was another good show from the Marvel Netflix factory, and I am looking forward to seeing more from it next year.
I would agree with your criticism. That's why it wasn't higher up. I would say that Jessica Jones was my favourite TV show of last year, and the reason why Luke Cage didn't get the number 1 slot this year is because it did kind of go off the boil a little bit in the second half. But the first half was very strong, and the second half was certainly entertaining. So I would recommend it. If you're sitting on the fence about Luke Cage, I definitely recommend going and checking it out.
Okay.
So yours is number 2?
Yep, okay. Next up then, number 2 on the countdown, and it is, I'm pretty sure we're not going to end up squabbling over the placement of this, it's Westworld. Yeah, we covered the first episode of this on the podcast in episode 18. Unless you've been watching it without telling me. How could you? I don't think you've watched the rest of it, have you?
No. There's a reason for that.
I love this. I really did. I mean, it was, even though it's based on an old movie that I haven't seen it, obviously it's a film. It did bring the slight tinge of originality that I've been looking for this year. The sort of slow build mystery and the who's a robot, who's not, the what does it mean to be a robot, the way it sort of built in on itself as the series went on. Yeah, it was a slightly slow first half, but they did start bringing in some very well-paced reveals from about episode 6 onwards out of the 10, and brought it to what was a massively satisfying, incredibly climactic point of explosion in the final episode. Of people I know or follow on the internet who have watched the whole of Westworld season 1, I don't know, I've seen a few sort of criticisms of, I'm not sure it was good because I guessed the twist at the end. It's like, the fact that a twist is guessable doesn't make it bad. The fact that a twist is well or badly executed makes it good or bad. Anyway, I don't know. If twists being guessable ruins TV shows for you, then fair enough. But I thought the Westworld twists, even though, yes, some of them were guessable, and there were a couple of big ones I didn't guess, or see anyone on the internet guess either, at all. Yeah, they were just well executed enough for it to work for me. I thought this was a great TV show, and it's probably getting a few points on novelty value and out of my current desire for novelty, but nonetheless, I thought this was pretty excellent.
I wasn't so much a fan of this show, but I'm not going to use the top 5 slot to say something negative, but I will say it was beautifully shot. I thought the cinematography was amazing. Again, having some money really does help, and I think they definitely had money to do some amazing exterior work in the west of America for the kind of cowboy set bits, and also the interior design of the kind of corporate bits were phenomenal. Their kind of Batman villain meets Apple Store interior decor was pretty cool. So yeah, it certainly was beautiful to look at. So following up on that takes me to my second favourite TV show of the year, which was Better Call Saul, Series 2, which we covered originally in MFV number 2, way back at the beginning. It's the second episode we ever did. We then also discussed the show again in MFV number 6. I really like this show. It's interesting because Breaking Bad obviously was a huge success, and a success because it was really tense and this real driving plot. And Better Call Saul, they went for a different tact, which I really like. It's really character focused, detailed characterization. Is it Bob Odenkirk who plays Saul?
Yeah.
Extremely good actor. Lots of other people in the cast are really good. It moves slowly, but it takes its time to really develop itself really well. It seems more like a play, you know. It does things that so many fast-paced TV shows that we have today and films just don't seem to do, like long scenes, big dialogue exchanges, really detailed characterization, so when every character acts, you know exactly why they're doing what it is and where they come from and how it relates to who that character is and how they relate to other characters. It's just this really detailed, rich characterization. It's believable. And also, you know, it's one of those shows that treats the audience with respect. It's like, you don't need explosions every few minutes. You know, you can really just get invested in these characters and their personal drama. Yeah, it really, you know, especially the second series, really built on what they achieved in the first series and went further with it.
Yeah, this isn't in my top 5. I don't know, we've only one space left. That may or may not be a big spoiler for you.
You may have the same one in
I've been starting to wonder if we have the same one in number 1, because there is one obvious one neither of us have mentioned, but
yeah, that's what I was thinking.
We will come to that. Yeah, Better Call Saul, I can't really disagree with much of what Alastair said. It didn't quite stick in my memory or tick enough of my personal boxes to get the top 5, but it was really well done this year. Yeah, it's just really rich and well and good. The slowness does sometimes, I don't know, sometimes when you're actually in the middle of watching an episode, it just gets a bit, come on, someone, do something. But yeah, there's always at least one like really big, funny or dramatic or both sequence to make each episode end feeling like the plot has really moved on. I don't know, I can see why this hasn't perhaps been quite as big a wide hit as Breaking Bad was. There is something about it that it sort of feels like it's just sort of an interesting appendix. So sort of, if you liked the Saul character, you might want to watch this. I don't know, just there's something about it that feels slightly sliced and essential. But at the same time, if you're willing to commit to, I am interested in Saul and I want to see this, it is a really good show. They are doing their remit to about the highest level I think they could. Right.
So, final
drum row. Final row, and yes, drum roll, blah, 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 blah. That must sound fun on the microphone. Yeah, as Alastair said, there's one obvious candidate we both like and haven't mentioned, and I suspect we may have the same number 1, which will certainly make our subsequent negotiations easier. In fact, based on what we've mentioned, this might be a fairly uncontested top 3. So, Orange is the New Black, then.
Yep. That was the thing.
Orange is the New Black Season 4, then, is the winner of Moderate Fantasy Violence TV Cup 2016. There's no real cup, but I doubt they care.
They've won enough awards. I think generally this series has been very well received, so I think they're going to be topping a lot of people's lists this year.
Yeah, they came back after Season 3, which I know you liked a bit more than me, but I did sort of go with the consensus that they got a bit sort of, I don't know, looking back retrospectively, viewing the whole thing as a big narrative, maybe it was meant to be a sort of calm before the storm, but I don't know, it was just a bit too calm, really. It was just a bit too much talking and a bit less actual drama. But yeah, Season 4, whether it was planned or whether they did sort of collect back together after Season 3 came out and think, shit, we better get some drama in. Either way, they've done it. It's fine. It's good. This was a really good, really compelling series. Lots of exciting things happened. Lots of characters really being pushed to the limit in a really heartbreaking way. One of the most sad endings I think we've had in anything. I cried. Yes, more than I did during Arrival or every episode of Doctor Who. I'm not going to bother spoiling it here. I can't even remember if we spoiled it during our review. I think we did, but I'm not going to do it now. Yeah, I felt this was fantastic, and I would admit the fact that they've reviewed this show till like season 8 still makes me think a bit, oh, okay. But fuck it, this was a great season. If they can continue to do it to this standard, they can keep going as long as they want.
I would second pretty much all of that. If you're interested in our detailed discussion of Orange is the New Black, we covered it first in MFV 10 when Series 4 first came out, and then we discussed the entire show, which is a spoiler-filled review in MFV 15. They've learned, they say they've gone along. Not only have they learned that maybe the last series was a bit slower, so they upped the tension this year. Also the fact that over time Piper has become less and less of the key character as they focus on some of the other supporting characters and really grown the kind of the universe of this prison, and you really get to know all the different people, and there's some really great enduring characters I really like. And one of the things why I'm not so worried about reviewing it to Series 8 is that I would be happy if they recycle the characters around. You know, some of those people are in there for very long periods of time for some of the crimes they've committed. But I wouldn't mind if some of the other main characters moved on and they brought in new characters. It's the sort of ensemble family nature of the show that I really like, and the quality of the writing. And so long as the quality of the writing remains high, which injecting new characters can revive writing. And yeah, based on the quality of season 4, I think, again, really excited for season 5. I think that, you know, especially to find out how that cliffhanger ending is resolved.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's a great show. Yeah, really enjoyed it. It's pretty much consistently been one of my top shows. For the last 4 years, I've always been saying, I really can't decide what my favourite show is. Is it Orange is the New Black or is it Game of Thrones? You know, last year, Jessica Jones did just pip in there, but Orange is the New Black consistently been, I've been saying it's like probably one of my favourite things on TV, if not my favourite thing that's on TV right now. And it justly deserves its position in the number 1 slot this year.
It was a great year for Orange is the New Black. I am more than happy to give it that. I mean, there is precedent for, obviously, at the moment, primarily The Walking Dead, for a show surviving for a long time on a concept and cycling through a lot of characters.
Yeah.
Certainly sort of maintaining a core characters and a core of characters like Piper and Ved and whoever, who are the main ones, and cycling through a lot of the others. And, you know, The Walking Dead is now on season 7 and it's still functioning. So maybe Orange is the New Black going to season 8 isn't that big a threat, really. It's just the more actually good and actually, you know, a good example of premium telly a show is. The Walking Dead, although it has its moments, is not what I would call good premium telly. Yeah, the more I sort of feel often the key to making this work is not to just go for as long as possible. I'm sure we remember the tragic, heartbreaking ballad of Dexter.
Yes, or 24, or
or indeed Homeland, which is now being dragged out to seeming infinity, or
probably many other shows.
I mean, then again, who are we to talk? Game of Thrones is now officially ending with season 8, so maybe we should stop being so snobby about the number 8, is what I'm saying. But yes, no, in terms of this year, season 4 of Orange is the New Black, the unanimous winner of the chart game. Well done.
So should we try and condense these down?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is basically a mathematical gimme, isn't it? In that we've both put Orange is the New Black at number 1.
Yep.
And the other 2 we both used were Game of Thrones and Black Mirror, and they were in that order.
So, yeah.
So the official MFV top 3, completely uncontested this time for TV, is number 3, Black Mirror, number 2, Game of Thrones, and number 1, Orange is the New Black. Boom.
I'm glad we've agreed on so much, actually. I was worried this would get ugly.
Yeah, no, apart from that part a few minutes ago when I threatened to stab you with cutlery, this has been fairly clean.
Except for now, we have to get to the worst TV show of the year.
Oh, yes.
Should I go first?
Yeah, why not?
Well, I'd struggled to come up with my worst TV show of the year. But for a different reason why I struggled to come up with my worst film of the year is that this was a really good year for TV. I think TV as a medium has gone from strength to strength this year. There's been a lot of great stuff. It was really hard to choose that top 5. There were certainly a lot of things that, a couple of shows that really just missed out on being in there. Suddenly it was really hard to think of what was the worst TV show this year. So what I've gone for is one that maybe I didn't give a roasting at the time when it came out, but looking back at it really wasn't very good. My worst TV show 2016 is the BBC reboot of Top Gear with Matt LeBlanc and Chris Evans.
Oh shit, I really thought you were going to say Westworld.
No, I was going to say for that. It was just, they lacked charisma. It just wasn't that interesting, to be honest. I mean, like, Grand Tour, I think, did show some of the best aspects of Top Gear and that it could be funny and entertaining. There was just the stunning lack of chemistry and the general sense of, why are we even bothering? For the BBC Top Gear, would say that I think it wasn't very good.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think the BBC Top Gear was that impressive. I think, as I said at the time, and as I think I said a couple of weeks back when we covered the Grand Tour, I think they didn't really take the opportunity to do something new or different. They could have ditched the format and gone in a new direction. They didn't. It was boring as a result. I can respect the fact they were trying, and I think Matt LeBlanc had something, and the fact that he's the one that's staying on and Chris Evans has apparently been let go means that maybe he'll take it somewhere, but I don't know. It didn't inspire me enough to watch it, so I probably won't ever find out. However, that did not win my worst TV show of the year because Top Gear, although it was a bit blur, didn't manage to actively annoy me quite as much as our actual winner, The Man in the High Castle. I'm not going to do one at length about this, partly because I know Alastair actually liked it, and partly because I already did that last week. But yeah, I don't know. This had a lot of interesting things behind it. The premise, I thought, had a lot of potential, but the actual execution didn't do a huge amount for me. Having said all this, I may still watch season 2 just out of a sense of vague curiosity, but I didn't particularly enjoy this. Yeah, never mind.
I remain cautiously optimistic that if it improves, in your estimation, in the rest of Series 2, maybe if they engage the plot a bit more.
Yeah, we'll see. Maybe we'll come back to it. It is interesting and maybe indicative of TV's willingness to take a chance, but they're willing to, commission an expensive, luxurious adaptation of this slightly old Philip K. Dick novel.
Yeah.
Which I can't imagine they'd start a film franchise about it.
I guess not, but Philip K. Dick does have a lot of film pedigree. I mean, like, say, Total Recall, Blade Runner, Sixth Day, Minority Report, a lot of big films. But then again, of all the unadapted Philip K. Dick novels, Man in the High Castle, though one of the more famous, is certainly one of the more challenging, so I do respect the fact they went for it.
Yeah.
Also, what I'm waiting for now is the TV version of And Now Wait for Last Year, mainly because of the title.
I'm sure they'll just change it like they did the Android Electric Sheep one.
Yeah, and Total Recall, which is originally called We Can Remember It For You Wholesale.
I can't see why they changed that.
Yeah, it doesn't fit on a poster. As regular listeners will know, at the end of each episode, one of us will recommend to the other something to read, watch, listen to for the next episode, and then we discuss it. This is a great opportunity for us to cover things that, are older and stuff, but still relevant to our pop culture discussions. So, Nick and I have taken our time to draw up our top 3 recommendations from each other in the last year. It's been a really good feature, this. I really liked it. It's given me the opportunity to try a lot of things I wouldn't normally. I'm mainly I'm willfully ignorant of comics, and now I feel somewhat at least educated.
Yep, it's been my pleasure to introduce you into this socially shunned, expensive and difficult hobby.
Anyway, Nick, do you want to start with your third favourite recommendation from myself to you in 2016?
Yeah, but my third favourite recommendation was the Camel-Led Social Club album by Half Man, Half Biscuit, which Alastair's just nodded knowingly, fully suspecting that this one would end up on this list somewhere. This is probably one of the only ones on this list, unless you go on one of the others on a sort of thin technicality, that I've actually willingly revisited since we did the segment. It's been on my phone. It's a good album. It's fun. I liked it a lot. Yeah, I mean, I like my comedy music. I like my sort of, I don't know, what's the word? Sort of colloquial folk type thing. I like the Pogues, I like Half Man, Half Biscuit. Admittedly, one thing I haven't yet got around to do, which I did say I would and have failed to do, is actually try some of their other albums. Because I'm quite curious what they've made of the way society has developed since they recorded the Camel-Led Social Club album.
I haven't listened to one of their most recent ones. I can certainly recommend that you listen to Trouble Over Bridgewater, which is hilarious, and CSI Ambleside. That's the other 2 of their albums I listened to.
CSI Ambleside sounds like it must be recent-ish. That's a recent-ish reference.
Yeah. Although CSI is about 15 years old now.
But old.
In position 3, for myself, is the comic Chew, which was a fascinating read. It's beautiful, it's disgusting, it's hilarious, it's tense. It's a fascinating concept. Again, like the Neon Demon, you remember Chew after you've read it. Very much life can be divided into before I read Chew and after I read Chew.
Yeah, there's just something about people eating disgusting shit that has a certain visceral ability to stick with you.
Which Chew really has nailed.
Yeah.
So, number 3, Chew.
Yep. Well, I'm glad you liked it. It is a great comic. It's one of my favourites. I have recently bought the last few issues after there was a big Comixology sale on the series, and there's also now a big Christmas half-price Comixology sale on all Image stuff, so I took the opportunity to buy the last few Chews. So yes, over the Christmas period, I suspect my big reading project will be, after reading the first one for this feature, going back to number 2 and just going to the end. I think it's time I finished Chew. Moving on to the next one.
Number 2.
Number 2 in my list is Jerusalem by Guy Delisle, which, let's be honest, it's probably slightly predictable that I've gone for the comic out of all the items you recommended me. Mm-hmm. But fuck it was a great comic. I don't read enough of sort of realistic or at least sort of slice of life cartooning, to be honest. It's a type of storytelling I tend to somewhat unintentionally eschew in favour of more high-octane genre stuff. But yeah, Jerusalem was lovely. Really charming, sort of gently educational in the way where you don't resent learning things. I really, really liked that. And although, again, pattern developing, I have failed to check up any of his subsequent work or other work, yes, this was great. I really, really liked it.
It's a really good book. It's really accessible if you don't know much about Jerusalem or Guy himself. It's a great just intro into the kind of the life that people lead in Jerusalem, and he tries to be as non-partisan as he can, and it's accessible, it's interesting, it's funny, it's sad at times, it really captures the full spectrum of emotion. It's a really unusual, really interesting book, so yeah. I'm glad you liked it. From the profound to the somewhat base and very funny. Number 2, my second favourite recommendation from you to me this year was Rick and Morty.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, another one that did like the gross out. Yeah, it's sci-fi comedy, animated Netflix show. It sends up a lot of sci-fi tropes and established sci-fi characters. It's just really funny, like, but the whole thing is a sort of Back to the Future-esque spoof in which a impressionable teenager hangs around with a cynical, slightly unpleasant old scientist guy. The much discussed Inception spoof was a very good episode, and I really love the Mr. Meeseeks?
Meeseeks, yeah.
Yeah, the Mr. Meeseeks was, again, a brilliant, darkly comedic episode.
Yeah, no, I only started watching Rick and Morty a few months back after it went up on UK Netflix, and then they very obligingly posted the second season as well. So I have now seen all of the stuff that exists, because the third season hasn't yet aired anywhere. Yeah. And yeah, it's a really great show. It is, to some level, a very nihilistic, cynical show, but it's just so funny that I can't really complain. It's good. Watch it.
We could consider doing, actually, the third series when it does air as a regular MFV segment next year.
Yeah, if it airs or shows somewhere that we can actually access, then that is probably a good idea.
Your number 1.
Right, my number 1 recommendation. There's been some good stuff this year, not limited to the stuff I just named, but my number 1 recommendation is the movie A Scanner Darkly, directed by Richard Linklater, starring Keanu Reeves, and based on a novel by Philip K. Dick. Because yes, of all the Dick products I've seen this year, The Man in the High Castle made a lot of works for me, but A Scanner Darkly really, really did. This was a really good, really luscious, really memorable headfuck of a movie. I enjoyed it a lot, right down to its sort of half redemptive, half depressing ending, and the weird sort of remote concept of it all. Yes, I thought this was a really, really good film. I saw it. I actually watched it twice. I liked it a lot. In order to make sure I fully understood it in time to talk about it on the podcast. And yeah, I thought this was great. I actually would quite like to watch it again.
You can borrow it on DVD.
I'll sort it out.
But yeah, it's a brilliant film. It's one of Philip K. Dick's most personal novels, as it's kind of about his experience of drug abuse and knowing people who've abused drugs. It's also, a brilliantly directed, beautiful piece of cinema, really strange, really unusual, lovingly well animated. Great performance from Robert Downey Jr. I think he's amazing in that film. Very funny. Yeah,
I like the way he plays this sort of two sides of that character, sort of popping up in two different parts of the storyline, acting sort of differently yet consistently. It's great.
Yeah, it's very good. So yeah, I'm glad you enjoyed at least one Philip K. Dick adaptation this year. I can imagine that you'll be more in your future as there's a Blade Runner sequel coming out next year.
Okay, although predictably that does mean I'd need to watch Blade Runner.
Well, you may find that coming in the recommendations section.
Fantastic.
But anyway.
Number 1,
my favourite thing that you recommended me this year was Uber, which was, brilliant comic.
Yes, it is.
Yeah, really, really good.
I'm unsurprised by this news, but yes,
it's
a really good comic.
I've been waxing lyrically to Nick and to anyone pretty much who will listen this year about the brilliance that is Uber. Always been fascinated by World War II and World War II related stories, especially ones that blend timelines and alternative history. The Manhattan Project was a close fourth, actually, for this list. I did really enjoy that as well. And that's probably, again, why I responded maybe better to The Man in the High Castle than...
Because you just love Nazis.
No. Want to make it very clear right now. Do not love Nazis. Just weirdly fascinated by them. No.
Continue.
So, yeah, Uber is a great story, blending sort of history and science and science fiction, and again, very, very visceral, very, quite disturbing. I do sense a theme in these recommendations is some of these are quite disgusting and disturbing, as is The Neon Demon, my favourite film. So yeah,
you do you, Matt. You do you.
I'm not really sure what this says about me, but Uber, obviously doesn't shy away from the horrors of war, especially the horrors of war with synthetically enhanced super soldiers or Uber soldiers. But it's just a great story. It's really well written. It's really involved. It's terrifying. It's dark. It's it's grim. I just can't recommend it enough.
Uber is written by Kieran Gillen, who's very much, I think, a big writer at the moment. He's having what he himself refers to as an imperial phase, the sort of the period where he goes into the sort of big projects, big ideas, always at the risk of getting a bit self-indulgent. The sort of point where music artists record double albums, or
that's a good summary.
Jeremy Clarkson does the Grand Tour. I think the Grand Tour is very much Jeremy Clarkson and Co's imperial phase. Whether they'll pull it off remains to be seen. And things like Stephen Moffat doing his slightly massive epic storylines in Doctor Who that may have ended up being somewhat of a folly. The Dark Knight Rises.
Yeah, ambition.
Pure imperial phase. Pure sort of, I've had a few big successes. It's time to do something massive. And Kieran Gillen is so far managed to not do any massive follies during that imperial phase. I'm maybe it's coming. Who knows? Hopefully not, Kieran, if you're out there. But yeah, Uber is a really good comic. It's just quite grim. I mean, Kieran Gillen's very influenced, I think he said, by a lot of sort of classic Vertigo stuff, which is the imprint that puts out like Preacher and Transmetropolitan and a lot of other quite famous comics for adults, which do always have this sort of edge of darkness. But Uber, if anything, because of the subject matter, it actually seems slightly more willing to go into that really nihilistic area than some of its forebears. It's a very interesting comic for exactly that reason. It's very hard to tell what it's going to do. It does just feel like an unfolding drama where the writer is very much in control and very much willing to go to some dark places, and you don't necessarily know anything about where it's going to go, yet somehow it always seems to make sense when it goes there, which is what good drama does.
It does capture the uncertainty of reality. Like, again, it's not one of those shows where you can tell that, like, this is the point when good inevitably triumphs over evil. And, you know, when one of your core group of main characters are actual Nazis, generally you expect it to be a kind of storyline, you know, that when there's a conflict, the good guys will triumph over the bad guys.
Yeah.
But also, you know, the villains don't seem unassailable in their superiority. They are vulnerable as well. There's, you know, it's got the complexity of real life. You know, you got a sense the story could go in either direction at any point. It also does a really good detailed look at the Nazis and, you know, the things that they did and the awful things that they did and practiced. And it goes to say, if they came across the ability to create, like, you know, whatever you want to call them, superheroes, enhanced human beings, or whatever, yes, obviously they would use it in the worst possible way to push forwards their horrendous ideologies. So, you know, it does really grapple with that kind of, we're telling a story about Nazis, but we are in no way glorifying them. And also making the terrible things they did more accessible to a wider audience, which, you know, there's a lot of World War II stuff around, but not a lot of it has the subtlety or the complexity of Uber, even though it's kind of got this prism of a sort of very, very traditional comic story in it. Around it, it does really deal with the complex issues underneath it much better than, say, many war films or TV shows that I've seen, you know, recently or in the past. This year I read Kurt Vonnegut's Slaughterhouse-5, a great satire and dark novel about World War II. And I would put Uber definitely in the same vein as that. Really dark and really having something poignant to say about World War II. So yeah, if any fans of Kurt Vonnegut out there sitting on the fence, I would recommend pick up some Uber.
Yeah, maybe this is why The Man in the High Castle didn't entirely work for me. I'd be too spoilt by Uber in my Nazi alternate realities.
Yeah, it's possible.
Anyway, yes, I'm glad you liked Uber, as I say. The sci-fi alternate histories did always seem a bit of a good win, but I thought the undercurrents of pure darkness in Uber would appeal to you.
That's all we have time for this special MFV episode. If you've enjoyed this episode of Moderate Fantasy Violence, then please subscribe so that you never miss an episode. And while you're there, please leave us a review, as it helps other people find out about the show. You can also go to our website, which is moderatefantasyviolence.com, where you can listen to this episode and every previous episode. You can also listen to our bonus excessive fantasy violence episodes and read the odd bit of writing that we put up. If you go to the website right now, you'll be able to read my summary of all the films that I've seen in 2016, my kind of encapsulation of the year in film.
And yeah, around now as well, hopefully, depending on when I have time to write it, there should also be my top 10 TV shows of the year, which won't be identical to the one I listed earlier, because I will be including some things that we didn't cover for the podcast in it. And you could also follow us on Twitter as @MFV Podcast, or if you search Moderate Fantasy Violence on Facebook, we should also come up. Right, I've been Nick Bryan. You can find me on Twitter as @NickMB, or you can go to nickbryan.com for some more bits of writing and news of my self-published crime books.
I've been Alastair Ball. You can follow me on Twitter @AlastairJRBall, or you can find more of my writing at redtrainblog.com. Thanks for listening. We'll be back in 2017, where we'll be covering a whole range of film, TV, comics, music, maybe some books, and lots of other fun stuff. So, see you next year.
Bye. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. Probably not best to go to the toilet because the microphone will probably pick it up.
At least I'll have something to put after the credits.
This is my opinion on 2016. My opinion on 2016.
I mean, you'd need to probably hold the microphone next to your arse while the toilet was in use to achieve that, which would mean carrying your laptop into the toilet. But I'm willing to overcome these technical restrictions as long as you agree to be the one who actually does the pooing. Yeah, this is going after the credits.
Oh, should have followed this.